I remember when I was a kid, I was doing one of two things. I was either blasting 3 Days Grace and playing Spore, or I was watching this video about some random guy having a frilled dragon on YouTube. And when I was a kid, I thought this was the most incredible creature I had ever seen. It blew my mind that someone was actually able to keep one as a pet. And this really contributed to my current obsession with reptiles and probably changed my trajectory to now be a full-time crested gecko breeder because these animals just absolutely fascinate me. And so now that I'm an adult and I have free will, I thought that now would be the perfect time and I have the perfect excuse, being a full-time reptile breeder, to diversify my reptiles a little bit, and I went ahead and got a pair of purebred Australian frilled dragons. Shout out to these two breeders I was able to buy from. They were incredibly helpful throughout the whole process and gave me the perfect insight into how to care for them and all their diet requirements, temperature, everything like that. So this video is me building my dream enclosure for them. If you're a reptile keeper, you can probably relate to this. We've all been there. You're up a little bit too late watching one too many serpa design videos, and you think to yourself, I can build that. So this is my first time trying to build something like this, and of course, I went all out. I am trying to build a 6 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot, fully bioactive vivarium for these frilled dragons. This is a much bigger endeavor than I thought it would be, and this is not what I recommend anyone go out and do. If I were you, I would start small because there were a lot of hiccups along the way, and this ended up costing astronomically more than it needed to. I don't know why, but I legitimately thought that this is just how you stain wood. I don't know why. I honestly, looking back on my life, I guess I've never properly stained anything. This is literally just how I thought you stained wood. One thing that I immediately was aware of was that this was way darker than I thought it was going to be. You could blame it on the fact that I applied it completely wrong. That was a complete wash. I actually texted a picture of it to my wife, and she was incredibly surprised, to say the least. Some may argue that the way that it looks sanded is actually pretty good too, and I'd agree, but that's not what I am going for. So after I got some help at Ace Hardware, I was able to find the perfect stain, and this is how it actually looked going on. I also made sure to ask, hey, what's the proper way to apply stain? Because maybe I've been told the wrong way to do it or assumed the wrong way to do it. So they went over with me how to actually do it. And look at that. I'm actually wiping it on like you're supposed to. And immediately I was so much happier with the way that this stain looked over the other one that I had gotten. Now, one thing that maybe contributed to it, besides my complete lack of proper application, is that what I got before was a stain and a polyurethane combined. And I just did not like the way that it looked. And after one coat, I didn't see how it would possibly have a polyurethane kind of coating on it. It didn't seem like it was going to have the look that I wanted. So I'm glad that I ended up just going with this other stain. It's a better color, and I got polyurethane separately. So while the stain was drying, I wanted to just get some more work done. This is going to be a multiple day, and as you'll soon see, a multiple week, multiple month process. So any time that I'm waiting on something, I try to fill the time with something else. So while I waited for that stain to kind of dry, luckily doing it outside in the Texas sun makes the stain dry very quickly. But I went ahead and started doing some coats of liquid rubber. And this is a great example why you don't do work in your favorite clothes. These pair of shorts were my favorite. I loved how colorful they were, and they were the perfect fit on me. And I vividly remember when I first got them, my wife said, hey, make sure you don't work in these because they're a good pair of shorts. Don't ruin them. And very quickly into this, I immediately ruined them and got black liquid rubber all over them. I ran into the kitchen and tried to wash it off, but that was a complete lost cause. And before wrapping up, I wanted to get at least a couple of coats on the back walls and floor of the enclosure. So after I did a couple of coats there, I let it cure for a couple of days. All right, now it's time to actually get some trim on this so that we can hide this ugly particle board. I got these two different options because I didn't really know which one to use. I ended up going with the more normal looking, I think it's called common board, But every time I asked the employees at Home Depot if they had it, they looked at me like I didn't know what I was talking about, which is true. So now I got this carpenter square, which is a triangle, and started making some cuts. I never can remember if the saying is measure once, cut twice, or measure twice, cut once, but I think that I'm much more of a wing it and see what happens. And this looked like it was good enough for me. So after getting to work and cutting a lot of the boards down for the trim, we then sanded it all down so that it wasn't so rough. And I found some that had a little bit of a live edge to it. And the amateur in me was like, oh, this looks cool. It's going to make it look rustic. Then I sanded down the lips that I got. So the end dimensions for this are going to be 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and 5 foot tall. And we're going to be having a false bottom. So I got these 2 different pieces of wood to be kind of the lip for the enclosure. And this is what the glass is going to slide on. Now it's time to actually attach all the trim to it. The problem was I couldn't find our hammer for the life of me. So I was using this like random mallet that I found. I don't know why we have this, but I have it. It kind of got the job done. And I now, in retrospect, know that I am not properly attaching these fine nails. These are meant to be used in a nail gun, I believe. I don't have a compressor, nor do I have a nail gun of any sort. There's my wife crashing the chute. Eventually, she found the hammer, which is great. Thanks for that, Carly. And man, that made nailing all this trim in so much easier. There were a couple of places where there was decent gaps, but from YouTube, I've learned that you can just use wood filler to kind of fill in those gaps. It didn't really work out that well. I'm so bad at this. You're going to have to just forgive me, look away from the screen, and just disregard what's happening right now. Classic Robbie move. I'm so bad at filming everything. We're just going to skip to where I've already attached a bunch of stuff. So this is the proper stain, the one that I actually want, that will give it that nice brown look to it. Now I'm somewhat properly applying stain, but right here, you can see I made a fatal mistake. So after doing a couple rounds of stain and letting that cure for about a day, it's now time to put in the subfloor. So I ended up needing to scrape a bunch of the liquid rubber off so that I could get a proper bond with the walls and the subfloor. Now, if you can believe it, I made another rookie mistake, and I completely built out the subfloor before properly measuring it and seeing if everything would fit. So that cost another like 30 minutes of trying to get everything to work and trying to figure out all the measurements and re-screwing and re-cutting everything and getting the subfloor up to par. I will say this turned out much better than the base that I tried to build at the beginning of the video, so that worked out. I found out you got to build it on a level surface. Who would have known? Then I hammered it all in. It's a really tight fit, but I figured this is going to be good enough. It doesn't seem to be warping the edges too much. Then what I did is put Gorilla Glue on the sides of it and use the fine nails to hold it in place. Look at how this turned out. I'm actually, at this point, I'm feeling really confident, and I'm like, wow, look at me. It kind of looks like I know what I'm doing. But as you can see, a lot of waste, like I applied too much liquid rubber to parts that I'm not even going to be using eventually. But hey, we're learning. And look at that, all the trim and everything that I put up, it's actually looking like a big, I guess, cabinet. And now we're trying to put in the bottom lip, which is going to hold in the soil, and it's going to be holding the tempered sliding glass doors eventually. Of course, any of the wood that I actually, paid good money for, it was all super bent, because that's Home Depot these days. So I had to clamp it down and hope that it didn't just rip everything up once the glue dried. Then as an extra precaution, I went ahead and put silicone all around the edges of the subfloor just to be an extra precaution to make sure that there's no leaking eventually. And now at this point, the nightmare for me is over. This is the part that I actually have a little bit of experience with and the more fun part. For you guys and for me. So we applied some silicone to the back of these insulation foam boards. I think in the future, for any sort of smaller enclosure builds that I do, using this might actually be more cost effective than the great stuff. While the great stuff is, the great stuff. This ended up being actually the way better option, especially for this size of an enclosure. So we just applied the silicone on all of it. I did measurements, of course. I measured once and then made like 47 different cuts until everything started to fit. And we had a little bit of pieces that needed to just kind of be thrown in there. I used these like extending poles that I have. This is what I use whenever I'm vending shows to hold up LED bars above my table. And what I did is I extended this with a 2x4 so that it didn't poke a hole into the insulation. And I just kind of used that to brace the foam. So while this is curing for the next like week or something like that, it's going to be properly secure and have some good pressure being applied to the wall. So the silicone can actually make a good bond with the foam and the wall. Then I had a little bit of cracks and I figured, hey, the great stuff can just fill this up because again, it's the great stuff. And now you're going to remember that big gap that I left in the back from me measuring wrong. That's nothing that a little bit of the great stuff can't fix. There you go. Problem's gone. And this is going to be the most tedious, painstaking process in the entire build. But I didn't tell my wife about how messy this was going to be in our living room. Now that I ended up kind of carving out everything, I was just getting ahead of myself and excited, and I really wanted to see, okay, how can I put this build together? This piece of wood, I was so happy with. I thought it was the perfect piece of wood. It could make it look so nice. It's a perfect horizontal spot for them to rest eventually when they're adults. And then I found termites in the wood, so I immediately squashed any of the termites that fell out and threw that piece of wood back outside. So then I had to kind of start from scratch in terms of the design. I was really looking forward to using that piece of wood. I planned almost the entire enclosure around that piece of wood. But I ended up getting this giant piece of cork bark at a local reptile show here in Texas. So I got that and I set that in place with some great stuff and I propped it up with some wood and then I let that cure for a day. It's incredible how tight that foam will actually hold that piece of wood. You could probably put like 15 pounds on that and it would hold it really well. Now is time to start setting all of this wood in, and I would just kind of place this driftwood in random positions until I found a design that I kind of liked. And while I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep in mind a frilled dragon's kind of natural habitat, or rather, what are the things that frilled dragons like to do? And from talking with the two breeders that I bought from, they like to climb vertical, and then once they're older, more so like 45-degree angle and horizontal. So all of this driftwood I'm putting in with that in mind, knowing that eventually they're going to be adults and I'm not going to have babies in here anymore. And they're going to want more so like horizontal or 45-degree branches to be laying on. And they don't like to hold on vertically as much. So I'm just trying to give a good variety of all of that if I can. And a little tip that I saw in some YouTube videos is to use hot glue with cotton balls. And apparently that makes like a crazy chemical reaction. It gets super hot and then it like instantly bonds, which is really cool. You do have to hold it there for a little bit, but it does create a really good bond, at least to hold up these random pieces of wood while you're putting together the entire enclosure. Now to secure it all with a lot more great stuff. And what I ended up doing, which I now am very grateful that I made this call, is I filled the cork bark completely with the foam. If this was for like a crested gecko or something, I would have left it open. But with these frilled dragons, just because I'm not so familiar with their behavior, if they're much into like hiding and being really deep into crevices, if for any reason whatsoever they get stuck in there or they hide in there and they won't come out, it's just going to be a nightmare for me as a keeper. So I decided to just fill it completely with foam to prevent them from ever being able to hide in there or worst case get stuck in there. I wanted to use this piece down here to almost be like a natural looking pot of some sort and hold some plants in. You guys will see that I ended up regretting that decision. But now we go ahead, and I saw on YouTube a lot of people, what they do is they will use mortar to seal in between all of these different cracks that come with the insulation board. It's supposed to be that like you can easily divide it if you're actually insulating a house or something. It ends up making all these like unnatural lines in your enclosure and you want to hide it. Now that the great stuff has sat for about a day, it's time to carve it all, which another painstaking process, except this time, all of the foam bits that go everywhere can get into all the different grains of wood and the cork bark. So that was really fun vacuuming out for an hour or two. In hindsight, it does seem like I really overdid it with the great stuff. I could have used a lot less. Originally, I wanted it to almost like go into the wall, and I'm not that skilled, and I ended up just barely having any great stuff holding on the driftwood. But at the end of it, I think it looks okay. and it's time to move on to the next step, which was filling in some of the gaps that kind of missed. The great stuff grows a lot, especially this one that I got. This is like the 3-inch gap filler or something like that. It ended up making quite a few air pockets. So after I cleaned up the mess, now I wanted to move on to the fun part for me, which was using this heat gun that I bought. And originally I asked the Home Depot employee, hey, wouldn't a hairdryer work? And they were like, I don't think so. I don't think a hairdryer gets as hot. And I was like, whatever, it's kind of a waste of like 20 bucks. They were not joking. This heat gun gets like so hot. It like blasts 350-degree air out of it in a matter of like 2 minutes. And it kind of made me nervous blasting this really hot air at, like liquid rubber. I just was like, is this flammable? And it's in my house, but it was fine. That's not how that works, I don't think. So the reason that I'm doing this is apparently when you heat up this foam, it ends up making the foam like tighten up, and it does end up making it feel more like a rock. And I know that having like that nice textural surface in the long term helps with like naturally sanding down your frilled dragon or your lizard's nails. So that's a nice little benefit of, hardening it, making it more like a rock. I did notice that the heat gun didn't have much of an effect on the great stuff. So this is specifically something to do if you're doing something on the large scale and using it for the purple insulation you can get at Home Depot. Then I went ahead and filled in the gaps the great stuff left. And this I saw a trick for. You let it cure for like 2 minutes, and then you can push it down. And also, if you wear gloves while you're using the great stuff, trust me, you want to use gloves because, man, that sticks on your fingers forever. After looking at the enclosure, I decided that I wanted to put some more kind of naturalistic looking plant holders. So I found a bunch of nice bark, and I just started putting that in liberally everywhere. Some of them I regret doing, and I'll probably end up taking out, like this one specifically that's in the corner. It's so close to the heat lamp at the end of the day that no plant can survive it. So I either need to use a fake plant of some sort, or I'm just going to end up having to remove it. Now it's time to apply the dry lock. It's essentially paint with sand in it, and it waterproofs at the same time. So this is a mistake here. I thought that I was going to be using so much more dry lock than I ended up using. So I just poured the entire amount of the concrete paint into the tub, and it was rather wasteful of me. I ended up only using half of the dry lock in that one tub. Luckily I bought 2, but I needed to make lighter dry lock eventually. So after putting the first coat of black on it, I was filled with dread. I thought that I completely ruined this project. I thought it looked horrible. It doesn't even look like rocks. You can see all the like carving mistakes that I made. And at this point, I was really doubting if this was even going to come together. I vividly remember how worried I was. So then I waited till the next day and the paint dried. And then I remember seeing in one of Serpa Design's videos, he does a method called dry brushing, but he used brown. And I wanted to make this more of like a black volcanic rock look. I went ahead and did some gray dry brushing. And let me tell you, that changed everything. As soon as I started doing the gray dry brushing, I was filled with so much excitement, so much happiness, because it literally saved the project to me. I, of course, just didn't realize this is what you're supposed to do. But then adding all this dry brushing in with the gray, it turns all the imperfections into this, it seems like such a detailed, intricate design that you did, when really a lot of these were just accidents and I never even tried to put these in there. Once you do the dry brushing, it really makes it all look intentional and beautiful. You can see at the very top of the enclosure, I kind of just got lazy and I was like, I don't know how to make this look more natural. Because I did the great stuff and I didn't use the purple foam, the texture is just off and it's never going to look good. But, I got to live with it. It's fine. Most people aren't going to be looking that high, is what I figured. And this is a great example of how much of a difference the dry brushing does. And then here's that before and after I did the dry brushing. I ended up doing a third pass of the dry brushing and I used just white and I kind of just accentuated certain parts of the texture. And I think it turned out really good. So the reason we're spraying it down is apparently the dry lock will like secrete something if you don't wash it a couple of times that ends up killing most of the plants that you end up putting in this enclosure. So that's why we went ahead and did a thorough hose down. I mean, I probably hosed it down for like an hour or so. And another benefit to doing this is you get to see if there's any leaks in the enclosure, and I ended up not having any leaks, so that's great. Then I started smelling smoke, and I was really worried. It turns out a little bug flew into my video light and just killed itself, so. I did notice hosing out the cork bark that the water came out a really weird kind of sewage brown color, but it's finally time to actually do the fun part of building the enclosure. So we did the classic. We did the Leica on the bottom. I think that's how you pronounce it. Leica. That's going to help so that if there's any buildup of water, it's not just going to waterlog the soil and cause a huge mold and fungus gnat problem. It's also apparently good for the plants. Then we divided it with some just basic fiberglass screen. I know that there's better stuff to use, but that's what I had on hand. And trust me, I'm already in way too deep in terms of the financials of this project. And now it's time to just start putting in all the decorations, some more driftwood that I have lying around, and start putting in the plants. I really liked the ferns. I thought that the ferns were such a great addition. And it really all was starting to come together, and I was really happy about it. I made sure to put in this giant piece of vertical driftwood, and this is going to be great for when they're babies. The babies love to just climb vertically and be really high. I went with my Dremel tool and I kind of just sanded down any sort of really sharp points that I could find. The last thing I want is for them to accidentally like rip their stomachs open climbing on it or something like that. That would be horrible. And I ended up, of course, forgetting to press record half the time. And I did a lot of off-screen mining and we started putting in pretty much all of the plants. I figure you guys aren't going to actually care. I don't really know anything about plants, so I can't tell you, what their scientific name is, all that stuff. Yeah, I'm just going to put the plants in and then show you what it ended up looking like. I actually wanted this entire enclosure to have like a variegated theme that ended up not really working out because I did buy a beautiful, really fancy variegated monstera for this enclosure, and I wanted it to like climb up that main vertical piece of driftwood, and it ended up being way too big for the enclosure, so I kind of just keep it on the outside of the enclosure now as a, additive decorative piece to our living room. I have to give a huge shout out to Michael's Bromeliads. He has the best prices for bulk bromeliads, and I wanted this thing to be covered in them. These were some of the most beautiful plants that I had ever seen. I don't really know anything about them. I wish I could tell you what they all were. I believe I made a mistake though, and I attached them all with hot glue, or at least I attached some of them with hot glue, and I think that ended up killing most of them, and I'm really sad about it. But anyway, now it's time to put in the sliding glass door. I ended up finding this miter saw at a pawn shop for like $75. This thing is sweet. I read on Reddit and I talked to so many people that do woodworking and they were like, oh, miter saws are pointless. Just get a table saw. Guys, this miter saw slaps. This is the greatest tool to have for like my level of not knowing what I'm doing. It does perfectly straight cuts. It can do perfect angles. If I had this back when I first started this project, it would have looked so much nicer. Don't listen to the people saying that miter saws are pointless. This thing's awesome. I ended up getting some leftover wood that I had, and I used it to make supports with the miter saw on the bottom of the enclosure. So this is like the guide so that the glass has something to slide on that's smooth. I applied it with silicone, and I let that cure for about a day. I forgot to record me putting the glass in, and it ended up not fitting because I didn't take into account how tall the guides were. It was a 1/4 inch too tall. And I had already bought tempered glass. I got 2 foot by 4 foot tempered glass, just easy, simple measurements. And that's why I put the lips on the top and the bottom. So now I'm left with the decision. Do I pay $75 each for 2 more that are only a 1/4 inch smaller? Or do I remove the bottom lip and then make an even cut? But I remembered that I already did like the Gorilla Glue and the nails, and there's like no way for me to remove those nails, I don't think. Plus, it's going to be a nightmare to cut through that Gorilla Glue, and then I'm going to have to sand it all. Anyway, at this point, I was legitimately panicking. Here's what I ended up doing. It is the most bizarre way to fix this. So I got some random wood, and I got my clamps, and I measured exactly a 1/4 inch down. And I made sure that I got my level, and I made sure that it was perfectly level. And I decided to just try. I've seen in Blacktail Studios videos, he kind of does this sometimes, but he has proper tools for doing it. I do not. So this is how I kind of jerry-rigged it. I got some clamps and some wood and a leveler, and I just measured down a 1/4 inch, and I decided to just start hacking away at this bottom lip because there was no way I was about to go spend another like $150 on glass or spend another few days working on trying to remove this bottom lip without destroying the rest of the enclosure that I've already put so much money into and time. Luckily, after many hours of effort, it actually panned out. It was a nightmare, and it was a painstaking process. And please, any woodworkers or whatever, comment down below if you have a better way of possibly doing this. I wish that I thought of something better. This was the best that I could think of at the time. And then I was like, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and just redo the soil, because I saw a video that kind of pointed out you really want to mix different things together to make a really good airy soil. Otherwise the plants could die, or it's going to cause fungus gnat issues. It could cause just fungus issues in the soil. So I went ahead and completely, while the silicone was drying, just a real quick soil change is what I figured. I am glad that I did it though. Putting in a little bit of that cocoa bark was a good move. It's going to help retain some moisture. And again, the sphagnum moss with it also gives the soil a little bit more of an airy feel. And then I figured while I'm at it, I don't really like that bottom right piece of driftwood that I put in. I've got this beautiful piece of driftwood that I would love to put in this enclosure, but it doesn't fit with that piece there. So, while I'm at the soil change, I figured, let me just go ahead and rip this out. So I ripped out that piece of wood, and I did find out it's pretty easy actually to just remove some wood and then repaint over it, reattach it and everything. It wasn't that big of a deal. So it's good to know that in the future, if I want to kind of change up how I did this, which I can almost guarantee I will want to do that it's not actually that painful of a process. So the wall that I've put a lot of effort into can stay in there, and I don't actually have to do anything major if I want to change up some of the branches and stuff. So down the line, if I find some better branches, that's good to know that I can kind of just replace them. Also, huge shout out to Krusty Works for hooking me up with the most gorgeous air plant I've ever seen. I went ahead and put this just in the middle because that middle part kind of had some mistakes and I didn't do it too well. You probably can tell that a lot of my plants have already started to die off, or some plants have moved from the last time I showed you plants. I'm not a plant guy, and I was having a hard time keeping most of these alive actually. Now, this bottom left corner, I knew needed a little bit of work. I didn't like that pothos was slowly dying, and it looked a little empty compared to the right side now. And then luckily, while I was doing this, I literally got a delivery on my door, and it was my shipment from my friend Eddie, who has an incredible plant page on Instagram. And if you want to see some of the most beautiful, variegated, rare plants you've ever seen, he is the guy. Then I went ahead and replanted a different cutting from the same pothos and put it in that corner just to kind of fill up some space. My goal is for the pothos eventually to crawl up the walls of the enclosure, because I know the pothos is kind of like a vine, it can climb. I went ahead and gave everything a good spray. I just noticed that when you're building enclosures, once you start putting the plants in, if you give it a good spray, it just really helps kind of put everything in perspective, and you get a better idea of how this is all going to look for some reason. It also just looks really good for the camera. There's no better time to start putting in all of the microfauna. So as you guys know, this is going to end up being a bioactive enclosure. So I put a crap load of springtails in there, and I ended up putting, no lie, probably 200 plus isopods into here. I'm talking dairy cows, I'm talking zebras, I'm talking soils, I'm talking even rubber duckies, albino vulgare, the powders, the Oreos, the orange creams. I even put the hissing roly-polies actually that I have. Then of course it was time to add the leaf litter. This is what the isopods will mainly eat if the lizards aren't pooping enough, but I can guarantee you, with the amount of bugs that these frilled dragons eat, trust me, the isopods are going to be having plenty of food. And now this is the moment that I've been waiting for months of working on this enclosure. The glass fit, it worked perfectly, and now the enclosure is complete, and it's time to put the little guys in there.
On the day I was born, the nurses all gathered round, and they gazed in wide wonder at the joy they had found. The head nurse spoke up, said, "Leave this one alone." She could tell right away that I was bad to the bone, bad to the bone, bad to the bone, bad, bad to the bone. I broke 1,000 hearts before I met you. I'll break 1,000 more, baby.